Okay, welcome back to the final video in our series about how to build a CSS grid website. And in this video, we're going to cover the mobile styles. So essentially what we're going to do is some media queries. And because we've been working at a large size so far, we're going to have to kind of reverse engineer the media queries. So we haven't been working mobile first, we've been working mobile second, which is okay. So I'll show you a good way to do that. This is also a good way to take a website that's already, maybe it's not very mobile friendly, and you can sort of make it mobile friendly. We're going to utilize some tips and things like that that maybe you don't know about CSS and HTML. And we're also going to show you how to use grid along with the natural flow of the document. So let's just jump into it, and you can see that I already have if you look on CodePen, you have the ability down here on the bottom, if you see in this area here, to see how wide your screen is, so you can see it as it moves. And the iPhone, the original iPhone, or the iPhone 5, is about 320 pixels, so that's probably about as small a screen as you're going to need. That you're going to need to design for. So I like to start there and then kind of work my way up. And most of the time I try to get a feel for what do things look like, what does it feel like, and then my breakpoints are just kind of where does it feel good. Sometimes I have very defined breakpoints, and sometimes I just kind of go with what feels good. For a smaller website like this, I'm just going to go with kind of where things start to feel a little funny, where things get a little bit too wide or too hard to read or something like that, and then we'll set a breakpoint and then we'll change the elements. So let's work kind of element by element, and first off we'll start with our I don't know, you call this a masthead maybe. um, I'm going to show you the super simple way to do this. You could also include like a hamburger navigation up here, something like that, where a menu would slide in, which is not too difficult, but it's just more than what I want to really do right now. So we can do a couple of different really easy things, and I'll show you that right now. So up here we have our masthead that's called masthead inner. Remember, we have the inner class that contains all of these elements here. And right now the masthead inner is doing a display flex. Now if I take that off, you can see that it's going to change the way that this is. Um, the way that this is, you see that? So we can't see it when it's small, but you can see it when it gets large. It's not flexing. If it were flexing, then this row here would come up here like this, just like we have done before. Okay, so right now this is kind of the default, like this, and then when we get to a certain point, which, you know, maybe 600 pixels is a good point to go ahead and set a breakpoint there, because then when you get to 600 pixels, there's a little bit of space here, and you can see that that's okay, right? So that looks like a really good place to actually have a breakpoint. And so we'll go ahead and do it this way. So what I'm going to do is copy this, and I'm going to add um, a media query. Okay, so media queries are how we um, determine where to change things in the CSS. So when we write it like this, we say at media, and then because we're thinking in our minds to work mobile first. Okay, so we're not trying to think mobile second, we're trying to think mobile first, but we're actually doing mobile second, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say min width, and 600 pixels is what we're going to do. And then I'm going to put our masthead inner down here, And really all I need are the display properties here, so these four right here. The padding, unless I want to change it, is going to stay, um, it should stay the same, but we'll just keep it there like that. So that means that we can come up here, and all this means is that uh, at the minimum width of 600 pixels, so from 600 pixels and up, then it's going to apply these styles to this masthead inner. But before that, if we write any styles here, then it's going to apply those styles from 0 pixels all the way to 600 pixels. So that's how we think about minimum width. If we were saying maximum width, that would mean we would write some styles, like if we said max width 600, then it would apply all these styles from 0 to 600, and then there would be some other styles here that would be from 600 and up. Okay, so minimum width is from that width up, max width is from that width down to 0. Okay, so it's some people think it's backwards, but if you think about it, you apply these styles at the minimum width of 600, and then if it were max width, you would apply the styles up to the maximum width of 600. Okay, so that's how it works. And media queries, you just got to kind of work with them after a while. This one is a little bit different, but usually you have a lot of declarations for your regular, um, just the regular element, and then you only have a few things that you're doing with it whenever you do a media query. And that's the power of the mobile first, is that whenever it changes, then you're only adding a few elements normally. Now this one we're changing quite a bit about the layout, but you can see here that when we get up into it, that it comes down, and this is the normal default behavior. In fact, if we go to our menu and we take off the display flex of the menu, which is also being flexed, then you'll see that this is the default for an unordered list, which is what our menu is. Okay, and this would be an acceptable way to write it. It's not very sexy or anything else, but it is an acceptable way to write it. Now, what I would like to do is just center all of this. So if we could go to the masthead inner, and we could just say text align of center, then we can see that we center all of these elements here. And then we have our menu, and then we can say I want to leave it display flex, and what I can do is I can say justify content center, and that should center all of this, okay, which is what it's done. And now let's go ahead and add a little bit of padding to this menu. So let's say 1 rem on the top and bottom and 0 on the sides, and then that gives us a little bit of breathing space here. So already you can see that that's going to behave pretty well. You know, at 320 pixels, we're still going to be able to click on these, and then once we get out, then it's going to go to a display flex like that. Okay, so easy peasy, sort of inline menu, and that's really all you need. You don't have to have a hamburger button if you only have a few elements here, a few pages. So that's pretty easy and not too difficult. Now you can see when we get to 320 that we come down here, and this text is starting to get uh, a little too big, a little too left justified. So let's take a look at that. I believe that's the site title. No, that is the hero inner. Okay, so we come down to our hero section, and the hero inner is here. And what we can do is if we make this font size a little bit smaller, that's a little too small, about 2 pixels. So if we make it 2 rem, and then we also make this text aligned to the center, we have some padding. It's a little strange, and we have this that's a little strange. And then if we just make this 2.5, that might make it fit a little better. Let's say the max width is 80 of the viewport width. Okay. It's not exactly what we're looking for either. What if we do margin auto? Okay. So when you give an element, when you give it a width and you give it margin auto, then it's going to automatically center that element. You see how it centers it? Now that's not what we want. When we get out here, we want it to left align. But we do, I do like it when it's like this. When it's a little smaller and the text is there. I like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to copy hero inner, and excuse me. And what we're going to do is we're going to do an app media, and we'll say min width. I don't know when's a good point to do that. Maybe once we do that, you see how it's center aligned up here, center aligned here. Maybe once we get to the left align, then we'll make this text here left align like we had it before. So that'll be good, 600 pixels. And then we'll come down and we'll paste our hero inner. And what we want, remember, was this to be 50 and for this to be gone. So margin of 0. We'll have to declare that because we have margin of auto up here. And then now, when it comes out, our text is still center aligned, so we need to change that as well. So we'll have to say text align of left. So once we get out here, then our text should align to the left. Oh, it's H2. We'll have to change that. We have to come down and we have to nest our CSS, and then we have to say left. And then we can, that's the only thing that we want to change. We don't want to change the color or the size, so we will just get rid of those. You can see that there are some duplicates. The padding left, we're not changing, so we can just get rid of that. And you can see how you make certain declarations here, and then you only need to change the things that you want to change. So we only need to change the width and the auto, the margin, sorry. So then when you get out here and you get to a nice place, and this is what we originally had. And then you can see once you get over here, then it becomes center aligned. Now I'm being a little bit picky here, so I'm going to say the line height is going to be 1.2. And what that does is, let's say we get to 320. You see how that just brings everything together. Whenever they get onto a different line, it kind of squeezes the text together and takes this space in between, and it changes it. So if we go to 1.5, which is probably about where it was originally, it feels like it's 4 different words, right? It still feels like 4 lines, and not that this is one sentence. So in order to bring that together to be more like one sentence, we just need to change the line height. We can change it to something like 1.2. This, and now it says some amazing text goes here, right? But when we get out, it's okay to keep it I suppose it's okay to keep it there at 1.2. We don't need to make that change necessarily whenever we go back out to 600 pixels. So that looks pretty good. So we have our first two sections here, and they're looking pretty nice. And you can see here whenever we go in that we start to lose this feature section. That's the next section. So what we want to do is we want this to eventually just go each of these on its own space. Okay, so we'll have 3 across here, but then we'll have 3 vertically as we get into a smaller space. So let's get back down to 320, and then remember the features inner is this is the part that is flexed. So if we take that off, then you can see that it automatically creates a vertical centering of these 3 elements, which is what we want. I'm not particularly happy with the max width on that. I think it's gonna make things a little bit wonky. So we can take that and we'll see, maybe at 500 pixels. Some of this is a guessing game. You just kind of have to work with it a little bit and get a feel for it. That's the way I like to work. So you just try something. The beautiful part about the web is that it always can be changed. Okay, so don't feel like you're all caught into something. You know, don't get yourself caught. And so we can take these off. And now let's see what we have when we get down here. Okay, so we have this one has a little bit of extra margin because when we go out to 3 across, remember we created margin here. So we're going to have to get rid of that at a smaller space or a smaller size. So the way we would do that is we would take this, and again, I like to set my media queries for each individual element. You could actually set a media query here and then put all of the elements that you want to change at 500 pixels under one media query. I don't really like to do that. I like to group my media queries like this. So you have your hero inner and your H2, and then that's up to 600 pixels, and then after that, then you have what do you do with those 2 elements after 600 pixels. So, but they're all grouped together. That's how I like to do it personally. So that's how I'm going to show you. And what it does is it helps me to find the element, and now I don't have to look through all of the elements at different breakpoints. I can look specifically per element as opposed to looking per breakpoint. Okay. So we have min width, what do we say, 500 pixels? So let's do that. And we'll also, and you see how it shored that up, right? So this one did have some margin there, but now that margin doesn't kick in until we get to 500 pixels. So let's go ahead and save that. I'm not a big fan of this space here. This space is a little bit large as well, and what that is the features padding here. So what we can do is copy that, make a new media query, and again we're going to choose 500 pixels because that seems to be the right one for this particular element. And we want that padding to kick in at that point, but let's say we only want about half that at a smaller size. Okay, so we only want about half that padding at a smaller size. Let's see what we got. Okay. So that gives us a little bit more to play with. We're running into an issue where we have something is sticking out. It's over here. You see this? This is sticking out. So we're gonna, once we change that, the page is gonna kind of come together a little bit better. Right now, things are pushing off the sides and the edges, which makes it look a little bit messy, but it's okay. Trust me. And what we need to do is I want to address this space here between these two elements, and that is called our features group. And so what we need to do is we need to add some space here between our features group. And we'll do that only up to 500 pixels. Okay. So we take our features group and then we add some padding to the bottom. 2 rem seems like a good number to start out with. Just need to make sure that these two elements are seen together, and then these two are seen together, and then these two are seen together. So you need to shore up the space here and then create a little bit more space there, and that'll group those elements all together. You see how they look a little bit more grouped together, and you can tell which picture goes with which caption, right? Okay, so but when we come out here, there's also going to be that same padding on the bottom. So what we need to do is we need to, when we come out to 500 pixels, we need to make sure that we say the padding on the bottom is 0, and it shores that up. You see how that moved? Because we want to have a little bit more uniform padding here. We want it to be 4 and 4 on the top, but instead it was going to be 6 on the bottom, which throws the balance of the whole thing out of whack a little bit. Okay, so this is what it looks like so far. You can see as we go down, we have our three across features. So once we get to 600, we still have these 3 across features. It might be a little bit too much, but once we get to 500, then we get these nice full images with the text. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm happy with the way that this is looking. This one is responsive right out of the box. I don't think we're going to have to do anything with that because the way that we made it was just a very responsive way. And then this section here is a real problem, so let's go down to our blog section. So what we have is our blog grid, and that's this blog grid here. And then we have blog inner, which is housing the grid, so that's where our padding and stuff like that is coming in. But let me show you how to deal with CSS grid. There are 2 different ways that you can do this. There might actually be more, but I'm going to show you a couple of different ways. Right now we have a 2-column grid, and then our rows are just automatically filling as we go down. Now we don't want that 2 columns to hit until, let's say, I don't know, what's a good size, 650? So 650 seems like a good size to have our columns hitting. There's enough text there. You could also push it to maybe 700. Could push it to 700, I guess. Let's just do that. So what I want to do is I want to copy this, and I want to set a new media query at 700 pixels. We put our blog grid down here, and there are a couple things that you can do. You can leave this as the grid. We can either define the grid here and then just let everything up here flow naturally, Or we can set the grid here and then we just change the number of columns down here. I'll show you both of them. It just kind of depends on how you want to do it. I prefer, um, because of some issues with other browsers, I've had the issues with Flexbox before, where you can't use flex direction, where you turn it from being side by side to flex direction column, which makes them vertically oriented. If you do that, Internet Explorer has a really hard time for some reason interpreting flex direction, and Safari actually for the Mac as well. So what I've taken to doing is just doing just the regular flow of the document, and then when I want to make things flex, then I add a breakpoint, and then I actually add a display flex or display grid. Now grid has a lot more standardized implementation I've found, so it's not as big a deal. So I'm telling you two different ways to do it, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So first thing we can do is we could just take this away and then do a one column layout, and you'll see it change. But you see how that changed to a one column layout, right? So essentially what we have is a one column grid, and then all of the rows are just being automatically laid out. There's a grid gap. I don't know if we need that necessarily. Um, Definitely don't need the column gap, right? Because there's no columns, there's only one. And you could do the grid row gap. So that's this gap here. You definitely want something here. I think what we want to do is to target um, we would want to target the blog text. Okay, that's the one that we want to target. And then we'll add a little space after the blog text, and that'll give us the space in between. We didn't set this up to be a blog grid, a blog group, where the image and the text and the button are all one big group, but certainly you could do that as well. Or you could just change this. Instead of being 3 rem, you could just do something simple like 1, and then that would give you a little space here between those, which I like, but we're still going to need to add a little bit of space after the blog text, which we don't have. So let's do that here. And then we'll just say margin on the bottom is going to be 2 rem. And then that should give us a little bit of space right here in between each of these sections. Now you just need to make sure it's going to keep this space whenever you come out. So you can see if we do this, it'll shore everything up here. It should pull everything up a little. No? Maybe it's okay. Okay. Well, if we can get away with that, then that'd be great. So let's just leave that there. It doesn't seem to affect the layout whenever you get to here, because that's really what you want to do. You want to create your more universal styles first, and then only make the changes when you need to make them. So that's the way to have the most performant CSS, and the way to create the best code to be able to maintain over time. So we got a nice we've got a nice little stacked blog roll. I don't know what you would call that, like blog featured articles. This is a little uncomfortable for me. So what we can do is change the blog. Oh, it's here. There's 5 rems of padding. That's why it's a little uncomfortable for me. So what we'll do is we'll set another breakpoint, and Where did we set them before? We set them at 700 pixels, so we'll just kind of keep that consistent. And then instead of 5, let's just do something like 2. And we'll keep that a little bit closer up here. Sometimes on a phone you want to make sure that there's enough space between each element, but you don't want to create too much space because you don't have a lot of space on a mobile device. So you want to tighten everything up a little bit, but just make sure that there's space in between all of the different groups of elements. Same thing here. This feels a little bit too far to me, and so we can come down to our blog CTA and see we have a margin of 3 rem up here, and that just feels like it's a little bit too much. So what we'll do is come down and we'll create another media query. Same thing at 700 pixels, and then this will go there, and we can make this 2 and see how that goes, or we can push it to 1 and see how that is. That's not too bad. Okay. You could change this. I'm not really going to change it or anything. Maybe we'll just stick with 2 rem. And then whenever we get out to here, then we get back our 3 rems. So it pulls it up just a little bit. We could actually left align this. So right now it's text align center, but you could see where you can move it to the left. That might be nice. It's getting a little bit too big right here, so I'm starting to get real picky. Okay, what I'm going to do is move this to here. And I'm starting to get real picky about things. One of the ways that I really like to work on web designs is to start big and then go to small. And another way is to say from, I don't know, what's the opposite of sharp? Like blunt, hitting, and then sharp, cutting. So lopping things off, and then as you get smaller, your changes are going to get smaller. So as you kind of get into the project, that's what I mean. So as you build out more of the major elements, then you can do more of the fine tuning. But I don't do fine tuning while I'm originally creating the website. I just kind of try to get everything on there and do the layout, get the layout like I want it. And then when I get the layout like I want it, then I can begin to work on the details. I start sweating things like this. So instead of that, maybe the font size is better to do 0.8. And you can see that this is going to fit a little bit better because it's 0.8 rem. Maybe. Is it going to work? Maybe it needs to go smaller. It's got a button on it, so you might have to tag that with something to get a little bit more specificity in it. This looks like what's happening. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So you see how we changed the font size there, and it allowed it to fit onto the line a little bit better. So let's say 0.8 because that seemed right to me. And then we'll go ahead and put this down here. We know that when we get to this place, we want it to be 1 rem. So I'll just do that and save it. Internet seems to be having a little trouble here. So we'll move on, and that looks fine to me. There it goes. Okay. So that's 0.8 rem. So it just fits a little bit better right there. You see? So when we get out to the bigger size, then it comes, it's a little bit bigger. Alright, and then the last part is our footer. Our footer is extending all the way out. That's why we get all this space. And that's because it is a grid. it's also being flexed. So, you know, there's that part too. So what we want to do is we have the footer grid and we have the footer inner. We're using the footer inner to center everything. We could actually wait. We might be able to wait on that, but we'll see. Okay, let's take care of the grid first. Again, we did the we were repeating 5 equal columns here, and we really don't want that to happen until where? We don't want that to happen until here, right? So like 11 something. We really wouldn't want it. Let's say 1170, just to pull out a real point at which things change. So let's just say at 1170 pixels, we're going to have our 5 across. Now this doesn't mean that you have to go from one big thing to 5 across. That just means that at this level, 1170, that's when we want all 5 of the items to be out here like this. Consequently, what we can do is, let's say, let's say at 400 pixels. Let's do 400. 400 is kind of random and arbitrary, but what we want to do is we want to say repeat 2. Excuse me. Now you can see that what we have let's get rid of that. What we have is, first we have all of these just on top of each other vertically, right? And then when we get to 400, then we're going to go to 2. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It doesn't work very nicely because we have 5, but might be okay in the end. And we're going to have to do some things with our footer group here as well. So let's look at the footer group is, if we take off the width, then it should flow naturally, right? You can see that. It just kind of flows naturally. It's center aligned, which may or may not be what we want, but it is center aligned. So we want this to happen when we get to our 1170. I don't know. We'll have to deal with that some in just a moment. So let's do another one of these breakpoints. We'll do a third one just kind of in between. So maybe 768 is the iPad size, and so we'll go with like 3 across. So let's see what that does. Okay. So now you have 3 and 2, and this is a little bit better. Not so bad, but a little bit better. Okay, so you can see here how we've used the grid to change columns at different breakpoints, right? We have a lot of redundancy here. What I want to do is I want to remove this here, so that when we're down in this space in 320 pixels, actually I think I just want to remove the grid altogether. That way we have all of our I guess they're footer widgets is what you would call them. I don't think we need that. So now our grid kicks in at 400. So it kicks in right there, you see. and then we have a 2 across like that. Getting kind of a funny, it might be some padding or something here. We're getting kind of a funny thing where it's pushing. It might be the 200 pixels here. So let's look at our footer heading. Footer heading is here. That's fine. I don't see any reason to change that, but we do need to change this footer group. Okay, so each of these is a footer group with the heading and the links. So let's go ahead and just copy this, and we'll make a new media query. So we say app media and min width of, well, let's do the 768 pixels. Let's see how that works. So right now, anything less than 768 pixels should be automatically flowing in this scenario. What we've done is because of this right here, it's centering the elements on the page. So the footer is centering all of these elements here. It's centering the footer grid. If we were to remove this, you could see that they're spread out. Okay, they're spread out a little bit more. And then when we get here, there's 3. Okay. I like the display flex, especially for the single column. That's not so bad, especially if you add a text align. Footers are always a little bit tricky, but you can make them work. So, you know, that's not as bad as it could be. That's all right. But what we can do is we can take this footer and copy it, and then we say app media, and then remember we're changing things here at the 400, so we'll just do that. App media and min width of 400 pixels. What we're going to do is we don't need the background color and all this kind of stuff. What we need is, I'm going to change this to space between, or you could even do space around. Maybe space around is better. And then we want to do text align left, and then items here can be carried over. So when we get to 400 pixels, then let's do space between. I see. Okay. All right. Alright, so what it's doing is it's treating all of this as if it were one large, as if it were one big thing. Okay, so let's start over on that. So this is all being flexed and centered using this flexbox call right here, which I think is fine for here. But once we get to here, maybe we should be breaking out of that flex. So let's just try that again. So let's break out, and we'll just do a display block. See how that works. So the footer, we'll say display block. So now we get our space back here. So it's centered here, and then we get out of the flex at this point, and then it's just the normal it's just the normal flow of the document, I guess is what you would say. And then here we're inside of the grid, so CSS grid is kicking in. I'd like to have these left aligned, so maybe once we get to this point here at 400 pixels, we can do the left aligned. So let's do this. We'll copy it, paste it here, and we'll say text align left. So these should be lined up here. So that makes a little bit nicer presentation, especially as you get out here. And then boy, what to do with it after that. I can't think very well about what else we should be doing with the footer. Maybe when we get to 1,000 pixels, that would be better to have it as 5 columns. So let's do 1,000. Maybe. Let's do this at 1170. Okay, that's pretty good, huh? Not too bad. There's more that you could do with that. There's more that could be done with it. But we're going to leave that footer there for now. So let's just go ahead and save that, and we'll look at it in debug mode, which is kind of like seeing it for real online. So this is the website that we've created so far. And then you would click this and you would go to more stories. Here are our links. And then if you do on a Windows machine, if you do Control-Shift-I, that pulls up the code inspector. So you can see it down here. This is the code inspector for Chrome. And you have a couple different elements here. One is if you clicked here and you find some element on the page, you can look and see and click on it, and then it'll pull it up in the inspector itself. So we're looking at this. Or you can move up the tree and you can see all these different things. So there's a group, there's a group. So the inspector is quite good and quite helpful. But what we want to use is this one, which says toggle the device toolbar. Essentially, this is a responsive testing bar. So it changes the viewport width on you. You can see it up here. And it allows you to test both desktop rollovers, but also mobile, and what that would look like if you were just touching it with a mobile device. It also allows you to kind of grab it and fling it like you would with the mobile device. You can choose some predefined, what would it look like on a Galaxy S5? And what would it look like on the iPhone 5? Okay, so this is at 320 pixels. What would it look like on the iPad? So you get a little bit of a sense of the emulator effect, but you can also jump right back into kind of responsive. So there's 320 pixels here, and then you can jump right to some like a little bit larger mobile phone, and then maybe a real large mobile phone, and then to a tablet, and then to a laptop or a tablet on its side. And then you get up into, like, this would be a really large, a full monitor size. And then they also have like 2K. So this is what it would look like on a television. So if you want to start thinking about large scale devices like that, or you're making a site that was going to be displayed on a television monitor somewhere, you could certainly um, check it out on here. Okay, so we have some max width here, and you can do that with some of these other elements. But I like this because it gives me just a quick snapshot of what's working, what's not working, what needs to be changed, what needs to be, where do I need to add breakpoints, because you can just kind of, to watch it, where do these get too small? And then you can add a breakpoint, right? So that's a really great tool to be using. This is every major browser has one. So Internet Explorer or Edge and Firefox and um, what is this, Chrome? They all have these developer tools, and there's a whole lot more here than just what you see, but these are the main ones that you're going to use when you're developing HTML and CSS. So you can see the CSS over here that's been applied to each particular element. You can turn those things on and off just to see what they look like. You can click through a different element, and each of the elements, it shows the CSS attached to it over here. So it's really cool, and a lot of these are when you're working with JavaScript or you're building a web application or something. So it's very interesting to learn how to use the inspector, and really necessary most of the time for debugging purposes or um, trying out something new. What would this look like? And you can type it right into the page, and you can see the results here. But I like to use it for the responsive styles as well. So it looks pretty good. I would need to check this on my phone just to see kind of how it reacts on a real device. But to me, this looks really nice. So that is how you can build a website using CSS grid layout. There are a couple different ways to go about it. One would be to just kick in the grid layout at a certain with a media query. So when it gets to a certain size, then you attach the grid, the CSS grid layout, and then the rest of the time it's just the normal flow of the document. Or you can start everything out on the grid and just do one column, and then as you get larger, then you can create more and more columns for your grid. Just kind of depends. This is a very, very basic way that you can introduce yourself to grid, and that you can change over a website to CSS grid. If you do have any questions, I want you to leave some comments in the comments below. Um, Also, if you've missed any of the other videos, this is the last one. So if you've missed one of the sections, the header or the hero or the feature section or whatever it is, I have a pretty extensive video for each one of those sections, as well as an introduction to the full project. So just go back in the playlist and find those. I want to say thank you for watching. You made it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. My videos tend to go long, and I know that, but I hope that there's a lot of information in there that maybe you're not getting somewhere else. Maybe background, maybe theory, maybe philosophy of code, something that will be able to help you to build better websites or more efficient websites. I'm thinking about how can I write code more efficiently. How can I write it so that it can be maintained by someone else? And then how can I write it so that it is compliant with whatever the web standards of the day are? So I'm trying to stay basic, but also do some pretty cool stuff, which is a fine line to walk in web development. But if you do walk it, I think you'll be rewarded both among your peers and with a better website and a faster website. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.